Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. And I'm very happy to be here with you today. A special word of thanks to Robert van der Laan from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who is our generous host for today. Your coffee is excellent. Marinus Verwij, a very good counterpart from ICO. Thanks for an excellent presentation. And Giuseppe van der Helm from VBDO. I've already sent some tweets out on the conference, hopefully not breaking the Chatham House rule, but because I really enjoy the gathering here and the fact that we're all together from different angles. A lot of young people, a lot of women, which always cheers me up, and a lot of food for thought. I won't keep you too long from your coffee break, because actually I'm dying for coffee myself. I won't bore you with a PowerPoint presentation, because in my case everything always goes wrong. But it's a pleasure to address you here today with a few words on Dutch government policy, and I also speak here on behalf of my colleagues from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Agriculture. As we can see here today by the huge attendance, I've never seen a workshop on corporate social responsibility where people are actually standing and don't even find a chair. It's like a pop concert or something. We can see that there is an increase in interest, a tremendous increase in interest in the impact of business on the lives of people in other countries. I don't even want to use the word human rights, because human rights as a word is a container idea. And I think we should really pinpoint the concept of human rights to what companies and people actually want and need and can do together. So we see that several parties, governments, customers, banks and civil society organizations, they expect more and more from companies that they respect human rights in their international business activities. Our colleague from Heineken already expressed that. I must say I loved your logo with your cork being bent into a little heart. If you can send me that by email, I would be delighted, because I think it's a really very strong message. The picture says more than 1,000 words. Why do we as Dutch government like to see the link between human rights and company activities strengthened? Because we believe that human rights support development and support the world to become a safer place. And that is one of the priorities of this government. The government thinks that freedom ensures peace, stability and confidence in the future. Human rights support freedom. Human rights are freedom. So that's why it's one of the 3 pillars of the foreign policy of the Minister Rosenthal. And we think it's a win-win situation. So the business case for human rights is becoming more and more clear. So despite the fact that it sometimes takes a few years to develop a policy and to get it into the genes of the business community, I myself, as an ambassador both to Guatemala and Bangladesh, where there were lots of corporate social responsibility issues, I've seen it grow and grow. And even companies there, with all the challenges they face, look at the mining company we saw in that film. I also dealt with a mining company in Guatemala, and it was very difficult to even get them to understand. And it's not because they were ill-willed. It's because they simply, as engineers, as technicians, as financial experts, whiz kids, they simply found it difficult to understand the needs of the local people. And that's why the role of organizations like ICO is so important, to build the bridge between the often well-intentioned companies and the well-intentioned communities. But they don't find each other because they speak a different language and they have other needs. And I've seen it work very well. I've seen a lot of challenges, and I think the mining sector is going to be one of the challenges in the future. So I think, ICO, you're really on the right track to address that problem. The government, therefore, as I already said, really finds it important that corporate social responsibility is being developed. And we want to support companies, also by financing this seminar, to develop these corporate social responsibility policies. You can see it in our strategy for human rights. You can also see it in the activities of the Ministry of Economic Affairs. You can see it in our projects. I will turn to that a little bit later. CSR, therefore, as you all know, is all about responsible business. And this is a task for us, government, because we do the legislative part, creating the right conditions, and it's for business, for the business sector. It means, at the bottom line, as we saw from John Ruggie, compliance with the law. There's already a lot of legislation, maybe even too much, because we want legislation to be adhered to, and that is sometimes very difficult, both for companies and for governments in other parts of the world. Anti-discrimination law, for trade unions, the law, freedom of association, prohibition of child labor. It's all very complex. It's not easy, and therefore it's a challenge. We would like to help the companies, and we would like to help the countries where we work to strengthen this legislation, especially the implementation of the legislation. And that is a steep uphill battle, because it's not always in everybody's interest to see that legislation strengthened and implemented. There are lots of stakeholders in countries that have other interests at heart, and mainly surviving and earning money. So we have to encourage them to keep their standards high and to really work at the implementation. And that's why the Ruggie framework, which was already mentioned several times, is so important for us, because it builds a bridge between the high ideals of human rights, which is very abstract, sometimes even tough nuts to crack business, and the practical challenges that businesses face. I think that's where John Ruggie did a great job, and he really knows his business, not just his human rights business, but also the company business. So that's why I think the guidelines are a breakthrough, and that's why we were so happy we were able to support his work and to lobby for his achievements. It's not a legal framework as such, as you all know. It's a reference point. It's a sort of moral standard. But nowadays, moral standards are well known to everybody. Everybody expects companies to live up to them, as our friend from Heineken already explained. So that's why we really think that this is working well, and it gives guidance. We've worked also as a government very much in the setting of new standards in the OECD. For example, our Ministry of Economic Affairs was chairing a working group which provided guidelines on multinational corporations to give them another set of guidelines, making their lives sometimes even more difficult, but hopefully also encouraging them to keep up the standards for good international business. Companies have their own responsibility, as we already saw, and the Ruggie guidelines encourage to identify and assess the actual and potential adverse human rights impacts of their activities and take effective action, the due diligence part, knowing and showing. Where do you see in the value chain the challenges? Where do you see that the hands of little children are involved in creating your textiles? I just passed the MEX building next door, and they already are very much aware of these challenges, like Hennes and Mauritz. They know that clients don't want to buy clothing that was made by innocent children's hands. It's as simple and emotional as that. And it's an uphill battle, and it's unfortunate that people are now all aware, but you have to do something with that. It's even a unique selling point now for companies if they can really show that they're doing something. But people, the public and consumers, are very critical. We want to help companies do that sort of business in the South, and that's why we've set up 8 pilot projects in 8 countries, in Abu Dhabi, in Moscow, in Pretoria, in Brasilia, Bogota, New Delhi, and Beijing, amongst others, but more embassies are joining in providing links between Dutch companies, international companies, the local business world, and communities to find out what are the pitfalls, what are the challenges, what if you don't know the value chain good enough, well enough, and you are forced to kick out one of your suppliers because he or she is simply not willing to help you in getting clean clothes exported to the Netherlands and Europe. We are organizing seminars. Our ambassadors are addressing seminars like this all the time, and they Twitter about it. So if you look at their tweets, you can see what they're doing. We also lobby with governments because we realize that companies often face the legislative part as a very complicated one. I already mentioned that before. And we encourage governments to be clear about their implementation. But they're also in a dilemma. I remember a conversation I had once with the Minister of Mining in Guatemala about a problematic mining enterprise. We, as the Dutch, were supporting NGOs there, and they were setting up demonstrations, actions. They were not yet taking to arms. I sometimes even had to stop them from becoming too vociferous. But it's a very difficult job to explain to the Minister of Mining in a country why we want to support these NGOs, why that is so important, because they see it's our national sovereignty. Why would you as a Dutch help these NGOs that undermine, literally, the activities of the mining company? And then we had to speak about human rights, about justice, about helping your company and your country to grow. And we believe that human rights are an essential part of making an economy grow. And that is the sort of dialogue we want to have with these countries. Finally, and then I will let you go for coffee, we believe that CSR is never done. Human rights are never done. Democracy is never done. It's an eternal battle. It's a challenging thing. But we have many, many partners now. And that's why this room is so full. And that's why there are so many companies involved now in looking at it. Sometimes grudgingly, because as we heard, it's not easy. But it's worthwhile. And if you are at a party or drinking coffee at a birthday party and your friends and neighbors ask you which company you work for, and you can tell them with pride that your company is active here in helping these people in poor communities, in helping to prevent child labor, I think everybody wants to work for a company like that. You get the better human resources, you get a good reputation, and that pays off. So human rights in business pays off. And with that message, I would like to leave you and thank you for your attention. Thank you.